Are you Invictus? Clint, are you Invictus? Are you Invictus?
What does it mean?
You know, when I started the Invictus Mind podcast, my goal was to unite a bunch of people who had a similar ideology or similar characteristic traits. Invictus means unconquerable. So it's an old Greek word for means unconquerable.
Unconquerable.
Honestly, just be totally honest, it was a new concept to me. I had to Google it when you sent it to me. But yeah, I do my best.
Tell me about what the show. What is your audience looking for? Tell me.
This is your first time here. This is the #1 program dedicated to helping individuals maximize their potential and truly become unconquerable. Here we have discussions about what it takes and what it means to experience and magnify political freedom, financial freedom, and spiritual freedom.
Yes, I would absolutely say that. I'm going to keep getting up, right? And I keep getting up and I keep pushing forward. And that's the type of mindset that you need to have.
I never lose hope. I never lose faith. My mindset has always been, if I want something, I don't give up. So let me tell you what is the #1 issue when it comes to being unconquerable.
Okay.
And the #1 word you have to think about here is not intelligence, not savvy, not strength, none of those things. The #1 thing is resilience.
You know I'm Invictus, come on. All right, I'm Invictus AF.
Well, May I have an initiation question for my tribe?
Okay.
Are you Invictus?
I believe I am.
So yes, I agree. I am Invictus.
I totally agree, man. And I think that if there's anybody on this planet that's unconquerable, it's probably me. I am not the type to take orders, and I am definitely in a position that I can stand up for myself right now. So.
And I was like, no way, I know what that word means now.
Yeah, man, very cool concept for a show.
You didn't ask me if I was Invictus.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Invictus Mind podcast. I'm here on the show with a guest I formerly had on in episode number 59. He was a corporate in the corporate finance world, but I invited him back on the show because in the last year or so, his career took a different direction. And, since I always talk about having secondary methods of income and alternative plans, I think that Danny has exemplified that in starting his own business. And so I want to share with everyone what he's been doing for the last year and just tell him how much I like the stuff that he's been doing actually. So Danny, why don't you just, say hi and, whatever else you want to say to get started here.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me on again. And you're right. I know the last time we were on, I had actually started another business because, as you mentioned, I've been in corporate finance for about a decade, and I had started essentially a finance consulting company. And so as I started to go through it, I got up to the point where I was just about to kind of start dumping money into a lot of the marketing and that kind of thing. And what ended up happening is that I was thinking about it and I was like, well, I already do finance full time. Before I really start to sink tons and tons of money into this, is there anything else, right? Because as you talk about the importance of having alternative revenue streams and things along those lines, well, I was actually listening to an episode of Tom Woods' podcast, and it was he had a guest on, and unfortunately I can't remember his name, but he talked about the value in subscription services. And I was out walking the dog as I was listening to this podcast, and I was like, well, let me see before I really commit to this, right? I'm only in for a few $100 at this point for website development, stuff like that. Is there something I can think about from a subscription service? Because I think subscription services, there's some value there, and that kind of thing. And as I was walking, I was like, yeah, I think maybe this would be something I can go and I can keep the corporate finance stuff separate and make this kind of like a creative outlet, right? Something you can really build from the ground up and dump all your creativity and that kind of thing in. And so as a result, here we are. You're right. I mean, it's almost a year later, and we officially launched, Tennessee. I guess you can't quite see it, but Tennessee Hot Sauce Company, officially right at about a month ago, and so far it's been very well received and
all right.
Good enough to get back on the Invictus Mind podcast, right?
Right. Well, so here's a good promo for you. I got your bottles right here.
Yeah, look at that. Perfect. Although I noticed that a couple of them are opened already, and so they don't quite flow perfectly.
Right. Exactly. So yeah. So
that's it. That's it right there.
I wanted to start out by sharing a message from my wife. She says that she used to work at a Cajun restaurant, and she's tried all kinds of hot sauces, and we like hot sauce. She said that yours is some of the best she's ever had. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I love to hear it. I mean, and the response has been very overwhelming, which and maybe you experience this in your world too, but I have to go into a commercial kitchen to make all of these hot sauces and stuff. And every time I go there or I have conversations with other manufacturers, I get a really bad imposter syndrome, to where I really like, I walk in and some of the people in the kitchen now, I mean, I even know them by name and things like that. And I'm still like, I don't know if I belong here. I mean, you guys are professional, there's chefs and people that have gone to culinary, and you know what I mean? Like there are real people that have their own restaurants and that kind of thing. And then I walk in there with a box of ingredients and a bunch of empty bottles, and I'm like, I still don't know if I quite feel like I belong, like I'm one of the people that deserve to be here. And so hearing that type of feedback is always positive, and it feels good knowing that you're providing that kind of value, to somebody who's willing to spend money on your product.
Well, it's nice because it is it's a food product. And so the only test that you have in a food product is whether it actually tastes good or not, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're the state, right? And then they need pH levels and they need water activity levels and they have all of this other stuff, that they want. I mean, they literally act like if it wasn't for them checking you up on this stuff, that you would kill all of your customers. They're like,
Yeah.
well, we need you to tell us what your pH level is. And I'm like, well, I already know what the shelf stable level is. And they're like, yeah, but you need to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for us to test it. And you're like, all right, I mean, if I'm going to do this above water and be able to distribute nationally and do this kind of thing, then unfortunately you have a lot of those hoops and stuff that you have to go through, where in reality it should be, what is the best possible product that I can provide to you in the most secure way. So that way I will not only get referrals and things along those lines, but you get, people that come back as opposed to somebody who says, hey, I opened this sauce up, and it's only sat on a shelf for 2 weeks and it's already bad. I don't want to spend any more money with you, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's the big feedback, that really kind of helps propel you, going forward. And when I first started just making kitchen batches, there's a company that's located here in Middle Tennessee called Hot Sauce Nashville, and they're owned by a couple that they're literally like the nicest people that you ever meet, and they are every weekend out at a couple of different farmers markets. And so when I went out there and I just started chatting with them, picking their brain and saying, hey, what about this and what about this and this and this and this, and one of the owners, Chelsea, I mean, she humored me, right? I mean, she let me bug her for like 45 minutes just asking her all of these questions. And so I ended up making a lot of my initial sample batches and bringing them out to her. And I was like, can you just test these for me, and sample them and let me know that before I start to go down this road, that I'm not dumb, putting together like good products that people are going to like. And so she's like, yeah, absolutely. And so she had some sample spoons and stuff. And so we poured some hot sauce. And so she was like, oh no, she's like, you have some really good stuff here. And so that was really that first vote of confidence that I needed to say, okay, well, I'm not completely wasting my time, by going down this route, because it's expensive, it's labor intensive, and that kind of thing. And so it's nice having that affirmation that really kind of helps get you through to that next step.
Sure. Now, you started saying that you were interested in creating a subscription service. Is that what you're planning to do with this? Or is it just because it seems like something like this would be more commercial marketing and everything else?
Correct.
But how do you combine the two?
And so, well, the original thought is that because we've got, we have two small kids, I've got a full-time corporate finance job and that kind of thing, is that the thing that we didn't want to do was step into a situation where, as we're launching, we're having to go to the post office every day or UPS every day or something along those lines, because that's a big time commitment. And so what we also wanted to do, and why we looked at doing it as a subscription service, is that, again, coming from a corporate finance full-time job, by using it as a subscription service, it allows us to be able to forecast and properly budget materials, revenues, things along those lines on a much more consistent basis, right? Okay. And so we have 150 subscribers, and we know that every 3 months the products are going to get sent out. We know, because we already know what people are going to order, right? And so we already know this is how many peppers we need. This is how many boxes we need. This is what we get into the kitchen to start making it. And so we would really be able to allow some stability from our perspective, to where we could do it on a part-time basis, because all we have to do is if we have 150 subscribers, is we call up UPS or the post office and we say, hey, we have a pickup, right? We can schedule it, and we can plan. This is a 2-day window where all of these boxes are going to get sent out. But one of the things that we also wanted to do, and this comes back to the conversation that I had with Jason Stapleton, is that when people open up a box, right, a subscription box, they get an endorphin rush. It's gotcha. Like whenever you're on Christmas, right, and you get a present from somebody and you're unwrapping it. And so we thought, well, how could we capture that from a subscription service? And so what we started to do was we started to make it where every quarter there's also a surprise, right? So every quarter, the subscribers are going to get a new bottle that's random, that we choose, and it's a surprise. And so make it only available to subscribers. And so, for example, the one for Q1 is a berry rhubarb ghost. So it's a strawberry rhubarb and ghost pepper sauce. But that's the way of really kind of letting people get that endorphin rush that they would get. And so it kind of was a combination of several things that just made sense to do it as a subscription, rather than an ad hoc setup, to where people can go on and order whenever they want. It's harder to forecast that kind of stuff.
Sure. So you've definitely capitalized on some of the training that we've both received from the Nomad Network. Absolutely. I seem to be plugging a Nomad Network every episode here, but it's just a great resource for people. So
it is, and honestly too, I mean, I've gotten great feedback, and several customers that have come out of the Nomad Network, and those types of communities and networks and stuff are very critical, and they're very important. As you know, from a professional standpoint, from a business standpoint, and that kind of thing, because there are several people in the group where, I mean, at the beginning I was just like, just get some product out there, right? Sure, and absolutely. So people like Chris, where Chris is like, I absolutely love the Poblano. I mean, he ordered, like, last time I talked to him, like 5 bottles, right? And that's the only one that he but having those types of networks and those types of communities to where you can get that type of feedback is very invaluable. Not only are you getting someone who's ordering 5 of the same hot sauce, but you're also getting feedback saying, all right, this is the type of sauce where people are going to get an attachment to it, and you might have a lot of success. And so you get market research and that kind of thing that goes along with it. So it's been pretty invaluable.
Well, that's great. So let me ask you, how long have you been making hot sauce for? Is this just something that you just decided, or is this like an old family recipe, or how does that work?
So the way it started is like we talked about before. I was listening to the Tom Woods show. Well, here in Nashville, in Middle Tennessee, we actually have like a Tom Woods supporters group, like a listeners group, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
It's a group of about 20 of us or so, and we try to get together like once a month. And so one of the guys that's in the group has actually been making hot sauce for quite a long time. grew his own peppers and that kind of thing. And so when I was listening to the episode, I thought, well, you know what? I was like, hot sauce would probably be a pretty good idea. And so I actually have a friend of mine in Indiana who has a mashed hot sauce, and he had been making sauces for a while. And so I called up my buddy in the Tom Woods group, and I said, hey, I was listening to this episode. I know you make hot sauce and you're familiar with it. You're comfortable with the peppers and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, I've never made hot sauce before in my life. I like it. I'm a hot sauce fan. I was like, what do you think about going into business together? And so we got together. He made some batches and I made some batches. And how that started is I just started researching. I thought about, well, what are the types of foods that I like to have hot sauce on? And so I'm like, all right, well, then what peppers are generally tend to be pretty widely available. And so you kind of start at your jalapenos and your habaneros. And you're like, okay, well, what goes well with Mexican food? Well, I like, charred poblanos, and I like cilantro, and I like this kind of stuff. And so you just kind of start putting some stuff together. And then I would research some other hot sauce recipes to kind of get the proportions down, right?
Okay.
Because if you're starting from scratch, you don't know, well, how much vinegar do I need? How much of this do I need? How much of that do you need? And then you just kind of start substituting in ingredients, or you start adding stuff. And so then you just kind of go from there, and you're like, all right, well, that was a little too heavy on the water, right? And so it's a little too thin, or this one probably should be cooked a little bit longer. And so we just kind of got together, we shared some recipes and that kind of thing. And so we put together a business plan. But he has a small child, and right around that time, he also found out that he had another one that was on the way. And so he also worked full time. And so, I mean, he basically said, he's like, I can't commit to another essentially kind of full-time job doing hot sauce. So, I told that to my wife, and she was like, well, do you want to quit? And I was like, well, no, I don't want to. And she's like, all right, well, then don't. And so I was like, all right, I guess that's all the motivation that I needed. So at that point, I just started tweaking recipes and going from there. And that was when I started communicating with the State Department, as well as the Department of Agriculture, and that kind of thing, and kind of kept the ball rolling. And of course, as you know, you work in a pretty heavily regulated industry. It's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, right?
Yeah.
And so you're in communication with the state, and they're like, well, now you need A, B, and C. And you're like, well, how long is that supposed to take? And they're like, well, we don't care. Right. And they're like, well, you need this and you need this. And so here we are, eventually it took, I guess it was probably about 8 months or so before we were able to finally get to the point where they're like, all right, well, now we'll schedule somebody from the Department of Agriculture to come out, and they have to watch you. They have to observe you and basically give you a passing grade of whether or not you're allowed to proceed, to produce your product commercial. Now,
do you rent out a commercial kitchen when you make this stuff, or how does that work?
Yeah, so in Tennessee, there are certain industries that are regulated by cottage industry laws, but hot sauce is not one. So for example, in our neighborhood, we have other people who have baking businesses or candle businesses and that kind of thing, and they're actually able to make their product out of their home.
I see.
But for acidified foods, you actually have to lease an approved commercial kitchen. And so I use a kitchen that's in Nashville, where there are a lot of other small businesses and stuff that also use the commercial space, which, I mean, other than having to pay for it, it's better to do that anyway, right? Because when I'm charring ingredients, and I don't have the scale that I really need at my house to be able to do that kind of thing, at least in a timely fashion. And so it makes sense to do it at a commercial kitchen. I just don't like being told that I have to, right? Which, considering the world that we live in, right? None of us like being told you have to do it this way.
Right.
But it does actually make sense. And there are other states where I believe that California actually has very lenient cottage laws, which is really surprising considering it's California. But I have talked with with a couple of manufacturers out of California that actually do produce, their hot sauces and stuff out of their own home. But yeah, so we rent, some commercial space, and we essentially reserve it, right? They have a website that you go to, and you reserve the equipment and the time that you need, over a certain period, and kind of go from there. But yeah, I mean, I try to get in super early on the weekends. I'm talking about like 6 a.m.
Right.
I know I'm going to be there for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours or however long it is. And I prefer to be able to spend the rest of my day with my kids, my family, rather than being stuck in the kitchen all day long.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
as early as I can, so I can hopefully get out, at a reasonable time.
I gotcha. Now, see, if I was you, and this is just my marketing brain thinking, so my brother is going through culinary school right now, and my wife is a pretty decent cook herself. And I said, when we get a new kitchen, I want to set up a bunch of cameras and lights and kind of have a YouTube channel on there. So you ever thought about doing anything like that? Hey, let's make some Tennessee hot sauce,
Right.
film the whole thing and everything.
You could. I mean, so I've talked with somebody before, and I think it might even have actually been in the Nomad Network, where they were talking about setting up a channel where you kind of teach people how to do it and that kind of thing. You could. I mean, it would be fun. I just don't know, I don't know what the market looks like for that, because my guess is that there's probably already people out there that do really well doing it. And that kind of thing, and they've already got tens of thousands of followers or whatever it might be. If I ever got to the point where I was able to do this full time, that is definitely something that I would kind of look more into. So to give you a little bit more of an idea, I'm also starting to grow some of my own super hot peppers, right? So I'm growing purple and peach ghosts and chocolate reapers and yellow scorpions.
And those will grow in Tennessee?
Well, I have a grow tent in the house. So I bought them all by seeds about a month ago or so. And so I've got them where they're about this big. I mean, we're not getting anything out of them yet. But I've got them in a grow tent right now. And so ideally, hopefully come April or so, I'll be able to transport a lot of them outside. Nice. And so in a scenario like that, I think that would be a cool additive feature to a YouTube channel, where not only are you making hot sauce, you're teaching people kind of how to go through some of the steps, but you can also say, hey, look, here's some of these plants that I'm growing, right? Here's my chocolate reaper that I've got. Let's check on how it's doing today. Or, you know what I mean? Kind of add something that's a little bit more new, unique, that kind of bridges together the hot sauce portion of it, but then also to the growing it, right? Like there's another piece of it, another facet of it, from beginning all the way to the end. And so, for example, I want to make a white ghost horseradish hot sauce.
Okay.
And so making a YouTube video like that, right, that shows here's my white ghost plant, and then kind of follow all the way through to the end product, I think would make kind of a cool YouTube video. And so there's definitely stuff like that we've talked about. And if the opportunity presents itself, it's definitely something that we'd have to, we would look at. It's just whether or not it takes off, right? Sometimes you spend a ton of money and you get 15 viewers and you're just like, well, where do we go from here?
Well, maybe just instead of a YouTube channel, just put it on your website itself, just some
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, which is totally possible, because with the as you know, right, the way site integrations and stuff work, you can actually do both. You can have the YouTube channel, plus you can have it integrated on your site,
right.
And that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, we'd love to do that. And it really comes down to the proper editing and you know what I mean? Like, you make videos and stuff, the time commitment to really be able to do it the right way, because from growing and harvesting all the way to bottling, I mean, it's hours, and no one wants to sit there and watch you do that for hours. They're like, I want to see it in like 7 minutes. Give me a 7-minute video.
Yeah, absolutely. I getcha. Dan, I want to commend you because, with all the craziness going on in the world, at least you've shifted your focus into doing something that's profitable and that has value to other people's lives. I still see here 2 years after the start of COVID, people are still complaining about the same thing they did 2 years ago. It's like, what have you done for the last 2 years? When we started at the top of the show, you had a business that you were thinking of, and you shifted focus, which is great. And you just keep going forward because you're the kind of person I really want to showcase on this podcast, is that you're not going to let the life's calamities just stop you from doing the things that are add value to yourself and everybody else.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is because working in the corporate finance world, when all the lockdowns and stuff started happening, I was part of those types of conversations, right, where they're talking about furloughs and layoffs and that kind of thing. And so when you're in that world and you don't own anything, what you own is your labor. And so you're basically saying, well, I'm going to trade my labor for what will hope to be a safe, secure salary, right? That's the trade-off. But then when you're involved in those types of discussions, unfortunately, the company that I worked for, they didn't lay anybody off. There were some frontline people and things that got furloughed, but they didn't have any layoffs and that kind of thing. But it gets your wheels spinning to where you're like, well, what if I am? What if I do end up being one of those people? I don't want to go to bed at night going, yeah, well, tomorrow might be it, because I've been there. When I graduated from college, back in 2007, and so my first two kind of quote unquote real jobs I got laid off from, because it was at the time of the stock markets crashing and real estate and every day. I mean, the first place that I worked at, I was there for about a year and a half, and I had been there for 2 months and they started making layoffs. Okay. And so every day it could have been your last. And so I was in a position where I was actually lucky enough to where 2 of the other people that were on our team had quit over time. And so it actually prolonged me for a year and a half before we had that conversation. And so I think when people grow up in that type of an environment and they realize, hey, this could happen at any time. I've got 2 small kids. The last thing I want to do is put myself in a position where I'm reliant on somebody else saying, no, we should keep Danny, or the conversation is, well, if it's between me or Danny, well, Danny's going to go. That's the way it's just going to go. And right. So that was really part of the driving factor, where I realized, like, hey, could the hot sauce business pay the bills? Well, no, it couldn't. But the infrastructure is there, right? And so if something was to happen and I no longer had my job, at least the infrastructure is there to where, hey, we'll struggle for a little while, but at least we have alternatives, right? At least we have options if we need them. And I think a lot of people don't think about that, but I think more people are. They've seen, especially people that work in very volatile industries that were impacted by lockdowns and that kind of thing. People are kind of seeing that type of thing. And I think part of that is what's causing what people are calling right now, right? The Great Resignation. I don't think everybody is leaving a job for a more profitable job or something along those lines, but they're realizing I was miserable working there. And whether it's job security or whatever, people are leaving. Right. And so hopefully people are starting to realize that at the end of the day, you're ultimately just a number on a spreadsheet if you're not looking out for yourself.
Well, it's interesting because, I've heard that phrase of great resignation go around a little bit, but, the material world that we've been living in, people are starting to realize, I don't really need all this stuff anymore. Right. Life can be a lot more simple than it really is. And rather than stacking up their debts and their credit cards, and, going back to the finance conversation we had, people are saying, I'm done with this. I'm done with having debt. I'm done with worrying about whether the bills are paid. I just maybe I want to work less hours. I think Jason was talking about a guy on his show that works like 24 hours a week just walking dogs, and everybody was giving him a hard time because that's what you do for a living. What kind of life is that? And he's like, listen, I make enough money to do what I want when I want, whatever. So I don't care what you say. Yeah. And so starting a side hustle, I think in this day and age is extremely important because, like you said, if you do get laid off or, fired, or the government comes and shuts you down, hey, at least you got something going on because, are you going to be left destitute or are you just going to keep going forward?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I'm sure you probably saw in the video, the dogs and stuff walking around, we also do dog sitting on the side through Rover, which is an app that essentially connects people to people who are dog sitting. And so we originally started to do that as a part-time thing because, as you guys can see, this one right here is our dog, and she's a little older now, so she's a little lazier. But similar to the guy you were talking about that walks dogs. I mean, we started watching dogs just as a part-time thing to keep her busy because she just had so much energy. And so now we have like a dedicated client base and stuff that anytime they're traveling or whatever, we watch their dog. And some of them are a little needier and that kind of thing, but it's another kind of, again, we're not going to pay the mortgage with it. But if you make an extra 8-10 grand a year, 6 to 8 grand a year or whatever, that's something where you can sit there and you can say, all right, well, we have other means, right? To your point, when you're talking about people that are leaving jobs, that are soul sucking for whatever reason that it might be, you cut back on some things, and now we don't have any car payments anymore, but we still have the dog business or whatever, and so maybe it's better to take a full-time job that doesn't demand the same amount of hours, or the pay isn't as good, but it cuts down on your commute, right? My commute goes from 45 minutes to 5 minutes, and it's okay. We can take a lower salary because we've got the dog watching business, and we've got the hot sauce business, and we've got some other things that are able to supplement it to give us that flexibility. And it's interesting too, is because on my podcast, one of the very early interviews that I worked for was for a company called ADP. I had interviewed somebody who works at ADP, which is a payroll company.
Sure.
And so the industry that she's in is very heavy sales. And so I remember hearing a long time ago that there are places that they have those sales, that's very heavy in sales and that kind of thing. And what they do is they really drive the people on their teams to purchase the new car, right? And to purchase the bigger house and go on lavish vacations and stuff, because they know that people are taking out, loans, and they're putting money on credit cards. And as a result, they're going to drive those sales, right? They know I need to hit my quota this month, because if I don't hit my sales goal, I'm not going to get my bonus. And if I don't get my bonus, then I'm not going to pay my car note, or I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage, and there's a lot of outside pressure to really encourage people to spend, more money. And more people, I think, are pushing back on that.
Yeah, that's a shame. When you were talking about that, I was thinking of a story that one of my mentors, actually the founder of the finance company I work for, he's like a billionaire now. I mean, he's been doing this for 40 years. And he was telling me when he first got started, he was in sales, of course. And, he just had a crap car, just a beater. And he was a little embarrassed to drive it. But what he would do is he would park it down the street and walk, the block or whatever to his client's house. So they're not like judging him in the car he drives.
Right.
But, he would always caution, his new sales reps. It's like, look, don't spend all your money getting flashy stuff just because it makes you feel good, because we're in a business of teaching you how to actually be responsible with your money. And if you have these high car payments, or you have all these flashy clothes and stuff, it's like you're actually going against what you think you are. I mean, the young salesman thinks that they're going to try to impress their clients with how much money they have, and it's like, well, what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, I mean, and especially too, I mean, it depends on the age of the people, right? Because chances are a lot of those sales guys, they're probably younger, and they're probably not necessarily selling to peers, right? They're selling to people who are established in their career or whatever it might be. most of those people have already gone through that phase, right? They've already gone through. They realize I don't want a $700 a month car note. You know, I don't think that you are practicing what you're preaching here. You know, you're trying to encourage me to hit these types of goals.
Sure.
Well, how much money do you have in your savings account? You know, I bet if you popped a tire, you wouldn't be able to afford replacing it. And so that's probably, you know, where a lot of those guys were mentally, not realizing that the people that they're trying to market towards, you know, they're done with that. They're not doing that anymore. And so that was great that your boss was trying to, you know, to instill that into them to really focus on what matters.
Well, if you look at people like, you know, I'm going to name some potential enemies, I guess, here, Bill Gates and, like, you know, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, they go around with jeans and t-shirts on, and, you know, you see all these memes on Facebook saying, yeah, well, you know, these billionaires aren't spending a lot of money on flashy clothes, you know, why are you?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And now I will say, though, too, in the hot sauce business, at least the brand that we have, because it's small batched, right? It's we try to source as locally as possible, you know, and that kind of thing. We're using fresh ingredients and that kind of thing. And so, you know, now it's not a car, but it is what I would still kind of consider a bit of a luxury product.
Okay.
So for example, kind of the most popular item that we have is a 4-month, I mean, it's a 4-bottle subscription, you know, a 4-bottle subscription. And the founders group is who we're filling space for right now. You know, the first 150 people, which we're a little over the quarter of the way there, they get a 10% discount, but the regular price of it would be $40. Now it does include shipping, but it's 4 bottles of hot sauce for $40. So it comes out to be, with shipping, $10 a piece. Now you can go down to your local grocery store and you could buy a bottle of hot sauce for $2 or $3. And so having those kind of conversations, would Bill Gates spend $10 on a bottle of hot sauce? Well, he probably doesn't actually know what a bottle of hot sauce costs. That's probably irrelevant for him. But there are a lot of people, though, who would look at that and they would kind of say, you know, well, I don't know if I want to spend $10 on a bottle of hot sauce when I know I can get, you know, Frank's or Tabasco or whatever from the grocery store for $2 or $3. And so there's also that element of differentiation that's in there, right? Whereas a lot of those guys, they generally, well, obviously they're buying in mass scale, right? So their scale is completely different. But they are generally buying things in powder form. And, you know, there are ways of being able to where if they're selling a bottle of hot sauce for $2, they're probably also making that bottle of hot sauce for $1.40, you know, or whatever it might be. Whereas using fresh ingredients and commercial space and not being able to buy 1 billion bottles at a time, you know, our food costs, you know, and bottling costs and material costs are more than what they're selling, you know, what they're selling.
Exactly.
And so you have to make sure that you're also providing that level of value to the customer and being able to justify the premium price, you know, and that kind of thing. And it does scale to the level when we're talking about like cars and that kind of thing, right? I don't think anybody would compare a 5 Series BMW to a base level Kia, you know, or whatever. So BMW has been able to kind of differentiate themselves and say, well, you're paying a lot more, but look at the quality, you know, that you're getting. And so from the hot sauce side, that has been a big thing, is trying to make sure that we can explain to people and justify the fact that we know we're going to be more expensive than when you go down to the local grocery store, but this is also too what you're getting. And we found that the response has been awesome. I was at a beer festival in December, and you know, people coming up and wanting to support a small local business was overwhelming. I mean, there were a lot of people. You know, we're based here in Tennessee, and there were a lot of people, and I didn't get it until later on in the day because, you know, the brand is Tennessee Hot Sauce Company and that kind of thing. And so people were coming up and they were like, oh, are you based out of here? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, we just live, you know, a little ways down the road. And it didn't occur to me that they were asking that kind of thing because they were like, oh, it's a local business. It's a small business.
Sure.
And that's why people were asking, right? Because they wanted to make sure and say, hey, this is a local business that we're supporting.
That's built into the value right there.
Exactly. And so they're willing to spend a little bit more to help, that type of a business. And it reminded me of the old, I might be showing my age here, but maybe you'll get it. But the old Pace Bacanti, commercials.
Right, New York City.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if I'm at a beer festival in Tennessee with a Tennessee hot sauce company brand, and they were like, oh, where are you based out of? And I'm like, oh, LA. And they were like, what? That doesn't even make any, that doesn't even make any sense. And so there's that also element to it too, that really kind of helps drive home some of that premium, that premium feel to it.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Well, Danny, it's been a great talking with you again. Like I said, I love your hot sauce. You've been plugging it, but you didn't share where people can go to subscribe. Is there a website?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we got the website launched a few weeks back. It's tnhotsauceco.com.
Okay.
So tnhotsauceco.com. And so part of the logic behind it is living in Tennessee. I was looking at buying TennesseeHotSauceCo.com. And then, first it was taken and they wanted to charge like $1,500 for it. And I'm not paying $1,500 for a domain. But again, having the conversation with Jason and he was like, well, do you think people are going to spell Tennessee right? And I was like, well, probably not. And he was, then don't do that. And so by being able to shorten it to tnhotsauceco.com, we were really able to kind of abbreviate it down enough to where it should be easy. And it's on all the bottles. And Tennessee Hot Sauce Co. is also on Instagram, and we're on Facebook, and we're on Twitter. And so we keep up pretty well as far as our social medias go as well. But yeah, I mean, it was great chatting with you again. And I know it's very different than a finance consulting business and corporate finance and that kind of thing. So I appreciate you bringing me back on.
No problem. Well, when we first did our show, I was advised to have you on every quarter because, our businesses were so alike. But I don't even, if you've listened to my podcast, and for those out there, I don't strictly talk about finance on my show. It's more just about what people are doing to, to get that edge in life, to do something different, to give themselves more freedom.
Right. And I'd like to, maybe at some point in time, go back down that route. I think that there are a lot of small business owners and stuff out there that have tremendous products, right? And they have or awesome services or whatever, but they don't understand really how to run a business from a finance perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to go back that route, maybe eventually at some point in time. But I also think having a successful small business myself also tends to allow a level of credibility there too. That says, hey, look, this is how I run my business from a business finance perspective. I think that would also give me some additional credibility. Plus, I mean, the level of creativity when it comes to hot sauce is basically just limited by your imagination. And so going from a corporate finance world, it's a really good creative outlet, to have as well.
Well, when I see your bottles at the Pepper Palace, I don't know if you're familiar with that store. There's a Pepper Palace, but they have like 5,000 different kinds there. So when I start seeing your stuff there, then I don't know you've really made it.
So I think the Pepper Palace really tends to brand a lot of their own, but they do have some out there. We are looking at wholesale. The only thing that, and as you know, from a finance thing, right? Obviously, finance is an area that I think about. I'm not going to be able to charge a premium for wholesale, right? And so that's one avenue that we're looking at, but it's probably more medium term. I have had some local businesses reach out to want to do like some partnerships and that kind of thing, which has been great. The focus currently has been to get the subscription portion of it up and going, mainly because that's such an easy and great. We'll be in a position where people, like we've had with some of these partnerships, where people are coming to us. Somebody like the Pepper Palace, right? They're the ones that are reaching out and they're saying, hey, how about we try and do something like this or something along those lines. And then you have shows like the Hot Ones, if you've ever watched Hot Ones before, when you have people like that kind of reach out. And I have a friend that had a sauce that was on Hot Ones, and after the show, he said that they got like 36,000 orders.
Oh, wow.
For it. And so someone asked me, they're like, "Oh, do you want to get on Hot Ones?" And I go, "No, because I don't know what we would do." I mean, we make 200 to 300 bottles at a time. If we got 25,000 orders, we would have to say no, right? Like, I don't know, we couldn't make 25,000 bottles.
Sure. All
But
right.
eventually we'll get there.
Well, good for you, Danny. I'm glad that things are going in the right direction. Why don't we just wrap it up right there? Again, Tennessee Hot Sauce Company. I recommend it. I put that stuff. I'm not going to say what's that guy, that quarterback who's always saying that I put that stuff in everything, but I use it enough.
But you can put on everything.
But all right, Danny, it's great talking to you, and stick around. We'll chat for a minute. Okay.
Perfect. Absolutely. You got it.